And that's one kind of hunger. But Mother Teresa said there is a greater poverty than the person who has nothing to eat. This is a hunger, she said, of people who are unwanted, unloved, uncared for, and forgotten. And these people are all around you in multitudes. And here's the big question. How do we feed the multitudes?
We're here from CMC, your conference, to talk with you about your commission to mature and multiply churches locally and globally. Our conference is focused on this question, how to multiply, how to feed the multitudes, globally and locally.
Now, I don't know about you, but when this topic comes up, this topic of feeding the multitudes, of growing churches and planting churches and evangelizing, my stomach sometimes clenches, and I feel guilt pouring in. This all feels too big, and I feel too small, and I don't have what it takes.
I wrestled with this question when I was a young pastor. How could I grow a new church in London, Ohio? So I read books looking for answers. I attended seminars. I sat in meetings at the conference office, at Rosedale Mennonite Missions, at Rosedale Bible College, with people looking for answers. And I felt plenty guilty because I can't manage to feed people fast enough. And you know what? I'm tired of feeling guilty and pressured and harassed, and I don't think I'm alone in that feeling.
My guess is that you too have felt the same tensions, especially if you're serious about following the last words that Jesus said to his disciples before he went to heaven. Go and make disciples. Wouldn't it be nice if we could stop using up our energy with guilt, quit laboring under pressure, find the yoke with Jesus to be easy and light? And you know, Jesus performed a miracle that gives me hope. And he performs this miracle when times are bad.
Jesus' first cousin, John, has been arrested, then imprisoned, and then Herod, to reward his daughter for good dancing, beheads John. And he delivers his head on a platter to this dancing daughter. Just before this miracle, the disciples bury John's headless body. Jesus hears all this and withdraws to a private place. But the crowds follow him. And so Jesus teaches them about a kingdom, not Herod's kingdom, but a new kingdom. And then Jesus does a miracle for the crowds. Jesus knew that one day we would wrestle with this question of how to multiply. He knew you would wrestle with the guilt and the pressure when you think of the Great Commission. And then he did something. He did a miracle to show you how to do it. Watch this, he says. It's going to help you.
Here's the story. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. That is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near, and when Jesus looked up and saw the great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip,
"Where shall we buy enough bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do.
Philip answered him, "It would take more than a half year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up.
"Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said,
"Have the people sit down."
There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. And Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish.
And when they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples,
"Gather the pieces that are left over. Let none be wasted."
So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten.
So imagine this boy. He had set out that morning in all innocence, carrying an ordinary lunch, like a brown bag lunch, not fancy, not exotic.
I brown bagged for 30 years while I was teaching school. Peanut butter sandwiches and carrot sticks and a cookie, over and over and over again. The easiest food in the cupboard at 5 o'clock in the morning, the food of the house, just enough food to get me through the day.
So what's in the boy's lunch? Well, bread, of course. Bread is so basic, this culture, that to eat bread and to have a meal is the same thing, means the same thing. And bread is also respected with rules that show a reverence to it. All crumbs larger than the size of an olive are to be gathered, not discarded. And bread is never cut, it's always broken.
But the big question with bread is, what kind? The rich eat wheat, the poor eat barley. Barley bread is heavier and thicker and doesn't taste so good. And actually, in the Middle Ages, barley bread was used as a punishment. Monks who were in trouble were given only barley bread to eat. And in his brown bag, the boy has barley, the food of the house.
He also has 2 small fish, sardine-like fish, probably dried, smoked like jerky. So barley and jerky. Not much, but still a lunch. And the boy, standing in the multitudes of hungry people with his lunch in hand, he has 3 options. Option number 1, well, this is mine and I'm just going to keep it. If I had been there, I might have chosen that option. I might have slipped off to a private place to enjoy my lunch. And this boy is probably tempted to do just that. After all, he's a growing boy. And you know how it is when you're hungry. You can't think of anything but food when you're hungry. You dream of food. Buttery corn on the cob, loaded pizza, pot roast, shrimp, sweet potato fries, double chocolate cake. You're restless for food. I can see you all getting ready here.
Hurry up here, aren't you?
But for some reasons, this boy thinks beyond his own hunger. Around him, he realizes there are some other people that need some food. We don't like this. None of us do. This encroaching of other people's needs into our own. And you know this when you've been up with a colicky baby at midnight and at 2 o'clock and at 3:30 and 4:30.
I sat with a woman once in a potluck in one of our conference churches. "I don't want to know what I know," she said. She was crying, barely able to talk. She had been, like the boy with the lunch, prepared for her own hunger and the hunger of her family. "We don't have much," the woman told me, "but we have enough." And then, like the boy, she started noticing hunger around her. Hunger for food, for love, hunger for meaning. So she signed up with an organization that matches people who care with people who have needs. And she got to know a young single woman with 3-year-old triplets and 2 other preschoolers. And she saw what she didn't want to see, what drugs can do, and violence, and neglect. She saw babies left too long in cribs, and a young mother struggling with drugged thinking. She saw preschoolers with bruises and weary eyes, and she smelled filth. I don't want to know all this, she kept repeating. I'm broken inside. My world has changed. I want to go back to before, but I can't. This woman had lost her innocence, her chance to eat a lunch alone with her family under a tree and away from the crowd. She had found people who were hungry, hungry for food, for love, for support, for meaning in life.
It's hard to enjoy eating in front of hungry people. You know, it's hard to even enjoy eating in front of a hungry dog, one that just stares at every bite that you're taking, wanting a bite himself. So we stay away from hungry, from people who are needy. If they come near, we say, go away. I want to enjoy my own lunch under a tree by myself.
So that was option 1 for the boy. Here's option 2. This is mine, and I'm going to manage it. Now, I'd like to think that if I had been in the multitude that day listening to Jesus, I would have thought, I can't keep this lunch to myself. But instead of taking the lunch to Jesus, I probably would have tried to manage it on my own. I'd work on the problem, figure it out. How can I stretch it? How can I parse it out?
And Philip tries to manage with common sense. Philip is a practical person. He wants to get a hold of problems by using his senses. When Jesus asked Philip where to buy food, Jesus wants to know, can Philip rise above the material, above the visible? But Philip doesn't. He doesn't think of saying, we don't have to figure this out. We don't have to buy the food. You can supply it, Jesus. I know you. But Philip leaves Jesus out of the equation. He starts talking about wages, common sense sorts of things. And I do this far too often. I'm an administrator. I'm supposed to have common sense. My job is to draft documents and plan programs and track costs. I honor common sense more than faith in what Jesus can do. Peter tries to manage by problem finding. This lunch can't go far, Peter says. Peter likes big and bold. And I'm like Peter too. I like to focus on what's wrong with the little that I have. This won't work, the disciples decide. This is too big for us. It's out of our reach. Let's avoid this problem. Let's send the hungry people away.
I did this once. I was teaching in a prison school, and during the midday count of inmates, the school was closed, and I was in my office working hard. The librarian of the prison school came into my office and sat in a chair, just sat there. He had never done this before. I felt God prompting me to talk with the librarian, but I argued with God. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know the librarian well. He was a man, and I was a woman, and there was strict protocol in the prison about intergender relationships. Afternoon classes were about to begin, and I had work to do. Talking with the librarian seemed too big for the time I had, too far beyond my scope. The end of count bell rang. The librarian got up from his chair, left my office, crossed to the other side of the prison, walked to the library, unlocked the library door, and fell over dead. I had thought that situation was too big for me, that I couldn't manage it. I didn't know what to do, so I avoided it. I didn't think I had the resources. I thought that my barley wouldn't do.
And this is what happens to me as well. When I have my eyes on my own interests, my own resources, how I'm going to manage them. But there's a better way, better than keeping my lunch to myself and hoarding my resources, better than managing my own resources, trying to make them stretch to meet the needs in front of me. This next option, though, frees me from this selfish grasping. This option frees me from the pressure of making things happen with my own resources. And this is the option that the boy in this story chose.
Option 3. This is God's, and he's going to multiply it. The boy gives what he needs most in that hour. And when he offers his lunch to Jesus, he takes a step out of his own agenda. His focus changes to kingdom work. What's amazing about the lunch is not what happens when the boy holds it. What's amazing is what happens to the lunch when it changes hands, when Jesus holds it. Jesus takes the bread, and the other Gospels tell us, looks into heaven and gives thanks. What Jesus is doing here is connecting heaven and earth. And that's what prayer does. Brings the perspectives of God to the puzzles on earth. At a recent pastors' conference, we heard a sentence, one I'm trying to remember and practice. Prayer is the work.
The look to heaven keeps the vision clear. Jesus, as he walked the dusty roads in Israel, kept talking about the Father's will, the Father's plan. The look to heaven keeps kingdom agenda before our own. How quickly, how easily we turn to our own agenda. You know what happens at the end of this story? The people want to make Jesus a king, an earthly king, just that quick. Back to an earthly king agenda, to what served their purposes, not what served God's.
Now, you know that God can make something out of nothing, like he made the heavens and the earth by speaking words. He could have set a buffet for these multitudes with a word, but he didn't speak a banquet into existence. He wanted to take what was in the boy's hands into his own hands and bless it and multiply it.
This is a really good story, but it's not enough just to study the Bible and to read about a miracle. I think what we really need to do is ask, in light of this miracle, what should I do? How does this miracle intersect with my life? What do you do with this miracle when you show up at work tomorrow, or go to school tomorrow, or go to the grocery store? How does this look around your dinner table? How can you enter into this miracle? Here's how: with what you have.
What's in your hand? God asked Moses. And it wasn't much. It was an upgraded stick, a staff.
What's in your house? Elisha asked the widow. It wasn't much, just a single jar of oil.
Rahab had a red rope.
Gideon had a pitcher.
Tabitha a cloth.
We're always busy looking for something we don't have. But God wants what's in your hands, what's in your house. Even if it's barley, don't wait for wheat to show up, wishing you had what other people have, their gifts, their looks, their resources.
All I had in my hand one evening was barley, that's for sure. I had a bad attitude that evening. I knew that I should write a note to a coworker about God's love for her, but I didn't want to. I didn't have time. I didn't know exactly what to write. I was afraid that the note would strain our relationship, but I wrote it, and I stamped it, and I put it in the mail, all with a bad attitude. 2 evenings later, we were interrupted at dinner once again with a phone call. And I had a bad attitude that evening, too. Poor Steve. I thought of not answering the phone, but I did, and I heard heavy breathing. So I almost hung up. But then I realized that someone was crying, my coworker. I planned to kill myself tonight, she said. And I had given God a 3-day chance to show that he loved me. If he didn't, I was going to commit suicide. And today was the day. And when I came home from work, I found your note in my mailbox. Teresa turned to God. Steve baptized her and her 3 daughters, one of whom later became a youth leader in a church. That's what God did with my barley.
We once knew a preacher named Jesse. Jesse cried when he preached. Sometimes so much that he had to just mop his tears away. And he didn't like this. He wanted to be eloquent. He wanted to have emotional control when he preached. So he asked God, please take away these tears. And God did. But then the power went out of Jesse's preaching. The Spirit quit multiplying the words of Jesse in the hearts of people. So Jesse asked God, bring my tears back. Bring my tears back. I'll cry in the pulpit for you, he said. The tears came back, and so did the power. Now God could use what Jesse had.
We attended the funeral of a man named John Mishler. John was trying to plant a church in the hills of Kentucky. How could he reach the people, he wondered? What would work? It was a chain. During the muddy season, when the dirt roads washed out, John pulled cars from the mud with his chain.
They laughed at Mother Teresa when she wanted to build a great orphanage and had only 3 shillings. And it's true. 3 shillings, not a lot you can do with that, even Teresa. But in God's hands, 3 shillings multiplied enough to build that orphanage.
It's a remarkable thing, this changing of hands from the boy to Jesus, to the disciples, to the crowd. And the miracle didn't happen while the bread was still in the baskets. The miracle happened as they gave the loaves away.
Don't make the mistake of waiting for the multiplication before you give. Multiplication happens after you give. How often do you miss a miracle because you worry about how crazy it is to offer barley? How crazy it is to offer a sleepless night, a note, a squeeze on the shoulder. How often do you miss a miracle because you stay trapped in your own limitations rather than offering your little to a limitless God?
With this miracle, Jesus is saying, you can try to feed people without me and feel stressed and pressured and angry and sorry for yourself. Or you can do your small part in a miracle, grateful that you have barley to share, and then feel free to watch me work. You can recognize that I'm the multiplier, not you. All you need to do is show up with the barley.
This doesn't take away urgency. Urgency is also a value of our conference, to be urgent about multiplying. Urgency is a value in the kingdom. Jesus doesn't call us to an easy life. He calls you to give your life and to give it sacrificially so that many can follow him.
Your soul was not made for an easy life, but it was made for an easy yoke. And your yoke can be easy when you know the difference between your job and God's job. You show up with the barley. God multiplies.
Someone that I loved seemed to me to be on the verge of walking away from his marriage, away from his faith. And I felt helpless. Only God, I knew, could help this situation. But I was urgent. I loved this person very deeply. If I drive 2 hours your way, will you drive 2 hours my way? I asked him, and he was willing. All the way. So I was driving. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I wasn't sure how to be with him. I had this CD with me, a college chapel talk about marriage that my daughter had given me when she heard that I was meeting with this person who she also loved. I didn't think, though, that I would give it to him. It would probably offend him. A college-age kid giving a sermon. So over French fries and a hamburger, I stumbled around trying to show my love. It wasn't a horrible meeting, but it wasn't an especially good one either. And at the end, I gave him the CD. I'm not sure I should give this to you, I said. You may not like it, but here it is. It's from my daughter. And that sermon on that CD changed his life and his marriage. And his marriage is still in existence today because of that. What is your barley? What's your barley? What do you have in your hand? There's a handout that we gave you that you should have. What's my barley? Could you pull that out? And if you don't have one, could you raise your hand and we'll get one to you? Looks like everybody. A couple of them here don't have them. Could you, somebody, grab a few and pass them around? So this, if you see something written on this card that's like you, okay? I'd like you to circle it and pass out some, hopefully you got a pen or pencil there. And if you have another idea in a particular category, write it in one of the blanks. And we'd like you to do this. We're going to go through this rather quickly, but go ahead and circle or write in things as we go over it.
Maybe your barley is a passion you have, like your love for children or motorcycles or physical fitness.
Go ahead and circle or write in something for that, a passion that you have. Or maybe your barley is an experience. Maybe you've had an illness, Maybe you've done some traveling, or maybe it's your career. It's something, an experience you have that God can use.
Or maybe your barley is one of your spiritual gifts, helping others, or administration, or mercy.
Or maybe your barley could be a possession. Maybe it's some electronic games. Maybe it's a basketball. Maybe it's your grill that you grill meat with.
Or maybe your barley is a skill, fixing cars, or cooking, or academics.
What do you have in your hand? What's your barley?
Do you have a house?
Make it a place of ministry.
Do you have children?
Shape them into kingdom workers.
Income?
Give your first fruits.
Do you have hands?
Serve.
Feet?
Go.
And your talent?
Use it for a blessing.
When you use what you have in your hands, what you have in your house, God multiplies it. And what if we all did this? What if we all brought our barley like the boy did? Think about this boy for a minute. Think about his memories of this moment when he was a man, what he later told his children, what he later told his grandchildren.
I'm thinking of that boy when he grows up and he was a man. Probably he participated in the Lord's Supper, in communion. And think of him celebrating communion, the time when Jesus again took that loaf and blessed it and broke it and gave it to his disciples. Imagine this grown-up boy reaching his hand for this piece of broken bread that symbolized Christ's broken body at a communion service, and then remembering, once, long ago, I brought Jesus my bread, and he broke it and multiplied it as well. It wasn't much. It was just barley, but he took it, and I watched him work. And what if we all brought our barley and then sat still and watched God do his thing? Did you ever go into the woods? Think of a sunny summer day like today. You go into the woods and you just sit there quietly. It gets real quiet when somebody like you walks in the woods. There's no, they're aware of that you're there. But you sit there minute after minute, not even blinking, and then it's just amazing what happens. One after the other, the little creatures start livening up. They come out into the open. And in an hour's time, the whole place is just alive with action. This is like sitting still and watching God work.
And what if we all prayed a prayer every day? One sentence. Jesus, I will bring you my barley today. Imagine the future of your church if each of you entered into this miracle like the boy in his barley brown bag type of a lunch.
We walked once into a conference church and saw a beautiful sight. 4 8-foot tables filled with fresh, homemade bread, golden crusts, perfectly formed, and you can just imagine the aroma that was surrounding that. For our homeless friends, a woman told us, we do this several times a year. It's my favorite day. Bake bread together and take it and give it to the homeless. Loaves of bread for the hungry multitudes, a miracle. Here's an idea about what you can do with this card that you have, this half sheet here, to help you participate in this miracle. Keep this commitment card handy where you run across it often and think, am I bringing my barley to Jesus to multiply? Let's have a prayer. Thank you, Father, so much for this group of dear friends here at Bound Mennonite Church and how you have brought them together in this place for this time. Thank you for the ministry of the leadership team here in this church. Thank you for Jim and Mary, who good friends of ours who couldn't be here this morning. They're witnessing the baptism of a grandchild, and just bless and encourage them in that, Father. But I thank you for the leadership team and their good care over this congregation. Lord, I pray that as each one ponders this and the little things that you have given them, placed into their hands, help them to be mindful of that and to be alert for when they can use this and give it what they have to you and enter into situations of need and provide and then pray for you to multiply it. We ask your blessing now upon the remainder of this day, and we just pray that you will go with each of us now as we depart this place. For we ask this in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.